You probably have one somewhere, a disc you haven't touched in years. You kept it because it was yours. Sony just decided that's the problem. Starting January 2028, Sony will stop producing physical discs for all new PlayStation games. Not slow down. Stop. Sony's official reason is clean and simple. Consumer preferences shifted. The market spoke. And they have a number to prove it. 80% of Sony's full game sales in 2025 were already digital. But here is the part Sony didn't put in the press release. On every $70 game, a publisher earns roughly $35 from a physical sale and $49 from a digital one. Physical has a tax. Manufacturing, packaging, freight, retailer margin, forecasting risk, and unsold stock returned at your expense. Digital removes every single one of those steps. The sale goes from Sony's server directly to your console. Nothing in between, no sharing. And Sony didn't arrive at 2028 in one jump. They walked there deliberately, one hardware decision at a time. The PS5 launched in 2020 with a digital edition alongside the standard model. 2 years later, the redesigned PS5 made the disc drive a separate purchasable accessory, something you attach later if you decide you want it. Then, the PS5 Pro launched without a disc drive at all. Each console generation, the disc moved one step further from the center. By 2028, it disappears entirely. Not suddenly, deliberately. In 2023, the disc drive became optional. A separate purchase, an add-on, an afterthought. Once you make the drive optional, you are quietly telling the market which future you are building for. The retailers who built their entire business around physical games are already feeling it. GameStop closed 727 stores in a single fiscal year. In the UK, Game, which sold discs for decades, entered administration. Its last standalone stores closed this year. And it is worth asking who actually still buys physical discs, because the answer is not who most people assume. It includes collectors and people who resell games to fund their next purchase. It includes families buying gifts, a physical box under a Christmas tree for a child who doesn't have a credit card. It includes people in regions where broadband is still unreliable, where a 70-gigabyte download is not a minor inconvenience, but a multi-day event. And it includes the 20% of a game's audience that, even in 2025, still preferred a disc for reasons they probably couldn't fully articulate. They just knew. They wanted to hold something. And this is where the story stops being about business and starts being about something most buyers never read. Steam's subscriber agreement says it directly. The content is licensed, not sold. PlayStation's terms say the same thing in different words. In 2024, Ubisoft shut down the Crew permanently. The servers closed. The game became unplayable. The receipts still existed. The game didn't. In 2026, Sony notified users in parts of Europe that 551 titles would be removed from their digital libraries. Licensing had expired. A disc can be resold, lent, given away, kept on a shelf for 30 years without asking anyone's permission. A digital purchase can be revoked when a licensing agreement expires. Now add backward compatibility, because this is where disc discontinuation becomes something more than a format preference. PS2 played PS1 games. Early PS3 models played both. Then Sony removed the PS2 chip to cut costs. PS4 are launched with no backwards compatibility at all. PS5 plays PS4 games, and almost nothing before that. The reason PS3 games still don't work natively on PS5 is that the PS3 ran on a processor so unusual that even modern hardware struggles to emulate it. The only way to play PS3 games on PS5 today is through cloud streaming, meaning you need a subscription, a good internet connection, and Sony's permission every single time. Some organizations are trying to fix this. The Video Game History Foundation, university libraries, and digital preservation archives have been working to document, store, and maintain access to games that are disappearing from commercial availability. The problem is that the legal framework around games was never built with preservation in mind. A library can lend a book. It can lend a DVD. Lending a game, or even providing remote access to an out-of-print title, runs into copyright law designed for a different era. The tools that exist for preserving books and films simply do not map cleanly onto games. So the institutions that want to preserve this history are working with one hand tied behind them. Here is the number that should end the conversation about whether this matters. The Video Game History Foundation studied every game released before 2010. 87% of classic games are no longer commercially available anywhere. Not on any store. Not on any subscription. No period of game history ever exceeded 20% availability. The Video Game History Foundation put it simply, imagine if the only way to watch Titanic was to find a used VHS tape and maintain your own vintage equipment. That is the reality for 9 in 10 classic games right now. For the Game Boy specifically, only 5.8% of its library is available for legal digital purchase. The rest exists on cartridges, in attics, or nowhere at all. In 2024, the US Copyright Office denied a proposed exemption that would have let libraries remotely share access to out-of-print games. The gaming industry's lobbying group opposed it, which means for 87% of classic games, the three realistic options are: find vintage hardware, travel to a specialist archive, or piracy. Those are the legal system's current answers. Now, remove the disc entirely. If a PS1 game was never re-released digitally, and you no longer have a PS1 or compatible PS3, it is gone. Not rare, gone. Once 2028 arrives, every game that exists only on disc and was never re-released digitally becomes dependent on Sony choosing to preserve it. Sony's track record on that choice is mixed, at best. Music already ran this experiment. CDs collapsed. Streaming took over. Vinyl survived as a premium niche for people who wanted to own something physical. Film ran it too. Digital storefronts removed content when licensing expired. Sony itself already demonstrated this on its own platform. The deeper problem isn't just nostalgia, it's that when games only exist as digital licenses, the question of who actually controls access stops being answered by your shelf. California passed a law in 2025 requiring sellers of digital goods to clearly disclose when a transaction is a license, not an ownership transfer. Lawmakers felt they had to say it out loud. The person who bought a disc in 1995 owns it in 2025. The person who buys a digital game in 2025 owns it until a licensing agreement, a server shutdown, or a policy change says otherwise. None of this means discs were perfect. The supply chain behind them was expensive, complicated, and genuinely inefficient. Sony's margins are better without it. That part is true. The question was never whether digital was convenient. It was who was going to pay the cost of making it convenient for Sony. The people who kept buying physical discs weren't being irrational. They were buying something nobody uses that word for anymore. A guarantee. That disc isn't just a piece of plastic. It is a physical record of a transaction that nobody can revoke, renegotiate, or remove from a server they forgot to renew. Books still exist in print and in libraries because we decided physical permanence had cultural value. Games haven't made that decision yet. 2028 is Sony making it for them. Sony says consumers chose digital. That's 80% true. The other 20% didn't choose anything. They just didn't know yet what they were giving up.